few days ago, Apple announced that they're discontinuing the 7th generation iPod Touch, which was the final iPod that was still in production. Along with them announcing the discontinuation of the final iPod, they also commemorated the brand and acknowledged how much of a pivotal product it is in their history, which I thought was nice. I always knew this day would come, but I thought Apple would just quietly axe off the iPod brand and not say anything about it, but this is more than welcome. This news is honestly kinda sad. I know people have been clowning on the iPod Touch for years, saying how useless of a product it is. Why is there an iPod that's still on the market in the current year? But still, this marks the end of an era. The iPod played a huge role in so many people's lives back in the 2000s, including my own. This news inspired me to make this video, talking about what the iPod means to me and how important it was when it comes to my love for music. My dad was my gateway into the taste of music that I have today. He got me into so many bands as a kid that I still love to this day. Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Rush, The Doors, The Beatles, Rolling Stones. And every time I would go to his house, I would spend an exorbitant amount of time listening to the music that I loved so much that were on his computer. He used a LimeWire back then, that's why he had such a huge library of music. He never bought any of these songs, he just pirated them. Eventually, he put all of these songs on a USB drive and put it into an old computer that I used to use as a kid that we had up until a few years ago, until after my grandmother died. She was the last one to use that computer, but after she died, we just sold it. Seeing that computer go after so many years and so many memories of using it is sad in itself, but this is about the iPod, not that computer. But anyways, eventually my dad was like, you want to listen to these songs on the go, right? Because I loved listening to music so much, but I had no way to listen to these songs away from the computer. So he got me these shitty MP3 players that I burned through because, one, I didn't take care of them, and two, they were very cheaply made, so they didn't have that long of a lifespan anyway. And then he got me the closest thing to an iPod. A piece of shit called an MP4 player that he probably found in a dollar store. It had the same build as an iPod, it had the click wheel, except the click wheel didn't even fucking work. You had to press the next and rewind button to scroll through menus. The click wheel and the entire player itself, might I add, felt extremely fucking cheap, and then eventually the middle button broke off, rendering it completely fucking unusable. So let's just say my experience with listening to music on the go wasn't so great up until that point. But then one day my dad got me a real iPod. The 5th generation iPod Classic as it's known today, which is the one you see on the screen right now. It was even in that same color, white. This wasn't brand new, I believe it was a hand-me-down from one of his friends, and I believe this wasn't the latest iPod Classic on the market anymore, but I didn't give a shit. I didn't know anything about any of that at the age of like 7. I was happy to finally get a competent music player that I can take on the go. And I used the shit out of this thing for like a year. My love for music increased by tenfold because now I can listen to all of the songs and artists that I love oh so much on the go and on something that actually fucking works this time. I took this thing everywhere with me. I listened to it at home, I listened to it in the car, I listened to it wherever else I was. Well, except for school because I was afraid it would be taken away from me. But then one day I lost this iPod. I have no clue where the fuck it went, never found it, and that was extremely saddening because I loved this iPod so much, and things just weren't the same for a while after I lost this iPod because I lost the only dedicated music device that I could take with me on the go. Eventually I got an iPad, but that wasn't the same of course, and it was only 16 gigabytes, so I couldn't store that much stuff onto it. But then one day when I was around 9 or 10 years old, me and my mom met up with my dad, which was very special because at that point he was barely in my life at all. Without getting too personal, him and my mom had a very rocky relationship. I would witness them fighting a lot, and then eventually they split up. He moved upstate, and like I said, he wasn't in my life all that much. But seeing him that day was very special. Me, him, and my mom spent the whole day together, and it felt like I was 5 years old again. And then at the end of that day, he gave me an iPod Nano, first generation. And by that point, there were already like 5 iPod Nanos that have come out, but I didn't care. It was a new iPod, and I was ecstatic. And what was especially cool was that iPod Nano was pretty much a mini version of the iPod I already had, because it came out at the same time as the 5th generation iPod Classic, I believe. But the one big downside was that was only a 2 GB model. I put like probably 100 songs onto it, and that was it. I was massively bummed. All I had was this iPod and a 16 GB model of the iPad 2, which I'm pretty sure by this point I filled up already. And then I heard that there was another iPod Classic being sold that held up to 160 GB worth of music. That may be extremely overkill, I know, but it was way more than enough for all the songs that I have and love listening to. I begged my mom to get me this thing, and she was like, why do you want this thing in the year, I think it was 2012, and, even by that point, not many people wanted a dedicated music device with no Wi-Fi, no touch controls, and a tiny screen. Meanwhile, here she was, using a fucking BlackBerry with the ugly-ass keypad, but anyways, I did chores around the house. I was even more nice to her than I usually was, and then one day she surprised me with a gift. It was a 160 GB model of the 7th generation iPod Classic. I was so happy. It was so nice to have an iPod again where storage was not an issue whatsoever. And I know today's iPhones have models that eclipse 160 GB, but at that time, it was a pretty big fucking deal. There was no iPhone, iPad, or iPod Touch that had anywhere near that amount of storage. And what gave the iPod Classic the upper hand was its hard drive, because I believe at that point in time, flash memory couldn't go up that high, or at least it was very expensive to manufacture and mass-produce products that utilize flash memory that have storage that high. But I don't know, I'm not the guy you ask about stuff like that, because I'm not a tech guy whatsoever. But anyways, that was my main music player for about a year. I loved it so much, but then on Christmas of 2013, I got an iPod Touch. I didn't ask for it, but the present was more than welcome regardless. I started to use that more, and I kinda abandoned the iPod Classic. The iPod Touch was really cool to me because, at that time, it was the closest thing I had to owning an iPhone. All of my earliest videos back in 2014 were recorded on that iPod Touch. All of those really lovely Miiverse videos I made back then were made on it. I still have it, but I stopped using it when I got an iPhone 6 the following year in 2014 for Christmas. And then I used that for a few years, and then it died on me, and then I got an iPhone 8, then an iPhone 11, and here I am today. Still with an iPhone 11, but I'm probably gonna get a 14 around the time it comes out. We'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much my story with the iPod. What it means to me and how important it was when it comes to, me loving music. It's very sad to see the iPod brand be finally killed off. I mean, we all knew this was coming eventually, but still, now that it's finally here, it's just surreal. I know the iPod brand was kind of useless to keep around at this point for several years now, but still, it was a nice alternative for kids who were not old enough to have a phone yet. And the 20th anniversary just recently passed. I low-key was kind of hoping around the time the 20th anniversary was coming up that Apple would announce a special limited edition new iPod Classic, but obviously that never happened, and that's obviously not going to happen at this point. Almost certainly. But let's not end this video off with a sour note. Let's instead end the video off with this. Here I am again, recording on the same iPod Touch I used to record all of those really awful Miiverse videos I made back in 2014. Ooh, the nostalgia, holy shit. Anyway, here's that iPod Nano that I mentioned in the video, and it's pretty much unusable now, because the screen is fucked, because as you could probably see here, I don't know if the shitty camera quality is picking it up, but several of the pixels have died, and the last time I turned this on, the screen was barely fucking visible, so that's nice. Here is that iPod Classic I mentioned, that has 160 gigabytes. Ooh, holy shit, and there's my reflection, wow. Doesn't turn on because it uses the old 30-pin dot connector that Apple products used to utilize back in the day, like 10 plus years ago. And we used to have a lot of these connectors lying around, but I have no clue where any of them are today, so this thing will remain dead for the time being. Same with this iPad. This is the 16 gigabyte iPad 2nd generation that I used to use all the time back in like 2012. which also doesn't turn on because, you know, of course it still utilizes that old dirty pin dock connector. And yeah, I didn't mention this in the main video, but I also have another iPod Touch, a 4th generation iPod Touch, that I have no clue where it is, because I didn't even like using it as a kid all that much, and I also dropped it, and the screen is cracked, and I kick myself for, you know, dropping it all those years ago, because now that iPod goes for a pretty substantial amount of money these days. And I would have totally sold that iPod if it wasn't in shit condition, and also I don't even know where it is, like I mentioned. But anyways, let's end the video off with this. Even though this video has nothing to do with Nintendo, it's about iPods instead, for nostalgia's sake, let me record the Wii U gamepad at least one more time on this iPod Touch. The memories are just flowing back to you, aren't they? And also, for old time's sake, let me do this. Screw the Miiverse admins. Oh god, how was I able to do that all the time back then? That hurt my voice. And also, fun fact, all those old Snarl videos I did multiple takes of, because sometimes the Snarl just wouldn't be satisfying enough for me. But anyways, I'm just rambling at this point. I don't think many of you care, and I don't think a lot of people watching this video right now were even around back then, so why would they even care about the behind the scenes of those old awful videos? Anyways, for real now, rest in peace, the iPod brand. You'll be sorely missed. This is the end of an era, truly. That's all I have to say, and show off. Bye-bye.